Welcome back. Today, we are looking at a brand new flagship level camera from Sony. Sony are releasing the A1 Mark II, which is really exciting because I think in a lot of ways, the A1 is one of the nicest cameras I've ever used. It's just an amazing all-rounder hybrid camera. So pretty much whatever you shoot, the A1 was able to handle it. It's very fast, great resolution, great video capabilities, and that's absolutely how Sony are positioning the A1 Mark II. So whatever you shoot, and if you're a hybrid shooter like me, so you're shooting photo and video a lot, this is just an amazing tool for any job that you want to do within that kind of space. And what's interesting about the A1 Mark II is there's nothing specific that stands out to me as kind of the headline new feature. And that does make sense because the A1 is still, right now in 2024, a great option as an all-rounder camera. It is still a fantastic option for pretty much anyone. It's one of the nicer cameras you can get. And the A1 II really just expands on that. Let's get into a little bit about what's the same. Let's get into a little bit about what's different. And let's talk about it. Now, I've been using this for the last 2 days. I've not had the best weather and I'd love to have my hands on it for a lot longer than that. But it's still enough time going out, shooting a bunch of different stuff, trying fast moving stuff, video, shooting indoors, to get a sense of how this camera feels. And it does, after a little bit of time, feel a little bit different to the A1. The main thing for me is that every single part of this camera is pulling in the same direction. And the idea of it is that it is just making your life as easy as possible. It is taking as much of the workload away from you as you want. Actually, it's very customizable in that way, but it does allow you to kind of shift a lot of the work onto the camera to not have to worry about lots of different things and to really focus on nailing the shot, whatever that might be. So it's still a 50.1 megapixel sensor, right? So same resolution. 50 megapixels is still really nice. There's loads of room to crop in there. I think probably some people would have liked for that to be increased maybe, but personally for me, I think that's probably about where the line is with regards to resolution that I'm actually going to use. So actually being able to crop in, yes, that's great. But if it was higher resolution than that, the file sizes are going to start getting more than I'd like, should we say. It starts taking up a lot of room on the card and on your computer. I actually think that's a perfectly reasonable resolution, but I can understand if you would have liked that to have gone up. What is noticeable is the image quality is improved. Now, Sony have said that, and it's a bit of a vague statement, but I've tested this out with shooting all kinds of different stuff, including higher ISO values as well. And actually that looks really, really quite good actually. I would have no issue. Certainly 6400, no worries, but 10,000, 12,800, really quite impressive actually, straight out of camera. We've still got 30 frames a second in terms of continuous speed shooting, so no difference there. And actually if you do want faster, I guess the A9 III is positioned as the super fast camera if that's specifically what you want. 30 frames a second is still, that's fast enough for almost anything that I can think of. But if you do want that crazy speed, A9 III is right there. So you can go for that. But what we do see in this camera is the pre-capture from the A9 III added in. And you can customize that all the way up to 1 second of pre-capture. So you can really customize that to how you want it to work for you. And frankly, that's a really useful thing to have available in the A1 Mark II. We also see the speed boost function that you see on the A9 III as well. So if you want to have a generally lower speed of shooting, let's say you want to have it set to 10 frames a second, you can then set it to have a button just activate up to 30 frames a second if you want that, but you don't want it always to be 30 frames a second. It is actually more useful than it sounds, because if you're in those moments where you just need the extra speed boost, but you don't want it all the time, that's great. And actually it just saves you always filling up your card. If you're shooting 30 frames a second all the time, you get a lot of photos. Now, something that is significantly updated is the autofocus, which I always think, how can this really improve? It's already so good, and that's industry-wide, right? Autofocus, we're at a point where it's just crazy. But there's a new AI processing unit in the A1 Mark II, which gives you updated algorithms for real-time subject recognition for photo and for video. And I've got to say, it is wild. You can set it and move on, never have to worry about focusing again. So you've got different options for how you want that subject recognition to work. You can now set it to auto, where it'll determine what the most prominent subject in the scene is, whether it's human, animal, and then actually draw a square around the face or the eye or whatever it might be that it's going to track then. And you can kind of leave the camera to do it. Now, I tested that out. That works really well. I was shooting my dog Nala running on the beach, trying to get some fast moving stuff. If she moved too far away, the camera started to think that I was trying to photograph the waves. But when I switched that subject recognition to animal, always was focusing on her. It had a little square drawn around her the whole time, no matter really how far away she got. And as she got closer, it would switch from her whole body to her head and then to her eye, which is exactly what you want from an autofocus system. Changing that over to human, it's so easy to film or to photograph people. You will just automatically get that recognition. It's happening in real time. It's just remarkable. It just completely takes away any stress of focusing. Just sorts it for you, which is exactly what I would want, especially from a flagship level camera like this, where you just want it as a tool. If you're shooting events, if you're shooting sports, whatever you're shooting, the focus is going to be nailed. Another update we see is in the image stabilization. And this is an area where, if I'm totally honest, in the past, I haven't always loved Sony's in-body image stabilization. I've been a little bit critical of it in the past because it's fine, but it's not as good as some others that we see. This is up to 8.5 stops with 7 stops of peripheral stabilization as well, which is interesting. I've never really thought that much about that, but I've got to be honest, handheld, this is exceptionally usable, whether you want to use a very slow shutter speed or whether you want to shoot handheld video, which feels incredibly doable. Now, that's the way I tend to shoot video. And actually, if I was shooting a promo for a business or something like that, I tend to go in handheld because it allows me to do it fast, to be maneuverable. And I love that the image stabilization in this camera is improved. So up to 8.5 stops is a lot, but it is genuinely impressive. Okay, speaking of video, this can shoot up to 8K 30p. Now, that was the case in the A1 Mark 1 as well, so it doesn't feel like there's a massive jump here in terms of video. In fact, we've got very similar specs, right? 8K up to 30 frames a second, 4K up to 120 frames a second. We do have better S-Log3 matching, so if you want this as part of a whole production, it's going to probably fit in better with other cameras, but otherwise, you're not necessarily gaining much specifically in the video specs. I think, to be fair, that's probably because the A1 Mark 1 already had such good video specs. Here's some 8K footage. Now, I didn't have great weather, so instead of shooting something interesting outside, we can look at some dramatic footage of me sitting in various places drinking coffee, but I think it still gives you it gives you the sense of the detail, right? And what's great about 8K video, you're not going to be using it all the time because the file sizes get really big, but it does allow you to crop in. It does allow you to really make the most of that resolution by punching in if you want to. You're still going to get really detailed stuff, which is really useful when it comes to editing. To be honest, the thing that was the most noticeable when it came to shooting video that felt upgraded was that autofocus system. It works in video. Real-time subject recognition is really useful because, filming Nala running on the beach, that's great. Filming myself, I just don't have to think about the focus ever. It's just going to draw a square around my eye, done. I can see myself in the flip-out screen. Super easy. Now, speaking of the camera itself, it does feel a little bit different, actually. It's a completely newly designed grip, so it does feel very nice. It's supposed to be more ergonomic. I've got to say, it feels pretty good in the hands. It's very, very comfortable. I've got the new lens on here as well, the new 28 to 70 f2, which is a fairly heavy lens, not too bad, but fairly heavy. And the whole setup feels nice and comfortable in the hand. Otherwise, you're probably going to be pretty at home here if you've used any Sony camera. They're all pretty unified now in the way that they operate, the way their buttons are kind of mapped out and stuff like that. And this really probably took me no more than about 10 minutes to get used to this. You've got the flip out screen, which is great, I think. I know some people don't like that. That's fine, personal preference. I quite like it because it helps me with filming stuff like this, but I totally get it if you're not into that. But I've got to say the EVF is beautiful. 9.44 million dots. It's a very nice high resolution EVF and it looks great. Now, this is the kind of camera that is going to be used trackside at sports, and absolutely if you want to use it that way, it has got upgraded connectivity as well, because actually delivering the results obviously is just as important and doing it in a timely fashion as being able to shoot them in the first place. So we've got Wi-Fi here, we've got USB, and we've also now got 2.5 G-base-T wired LAN. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't exist in that world, really. I don't do the kind of super fast delivering of results while I'm still right there. But I have spoken to lots of photographers who have done that or who do that currently. And I know how important that is. So having the better connectivity, having that speed, I think is a great thing. While it's not going to benefit me personally, I think thinking about this more as a tool rather than just getting excited about the kind of specs and stuff like that, which is, initially how it feels when you first get the camera in your hands. I think it all just, like I said earlier, pulls in the same direction of making this the perfect tool for the job. And with that in mind as well, there's also a new rear microphone, which is designed specifically to allow you to add a voice memo to a shot, right? So you take a shot and then record a voice memo to add to that so that you can make whatever note you want to make for later so that you know exactly what you were thinking at the time or whatever reference you need to make at the time. I don't really have any negatives or downsides to this camera. I'll be totally honest with you. I'll be totally upfront with you. It's one of the best cameras I've ever used. It's probably one of my favorite cameras I've ever used just because it's so nice to shoot with. It just takes away a lot of the work and just allows you to focus on the actual kind of, I guess, the art of it, the kind of creative part, nailing the shot, framing up your subject, stuff like that. I suppose there are areas where you might have liked to have seen some kind of upgrade, the resolution, for example, being the same as the A1 Mark I, the video specs being very similar, but it's a difficult one, right? Because the A1 Mark I is already so good with that stuff that there's a trade-off, right? If you start upping that resolution, the file sizes get bigger. The video specs on the A1 are already so good, it doesn't leave much room for improvement. And for me, there's again, a bit of a trade-off. For example, if you start shooting 8K at an even higher frame rate, actually editing that, playing that back is just going to get more and more difficult. You need a more powerful computer. So while on paper, if you're directly comparing this camera with the A1 Mark I, it might not feel like there's massive upgrades. I actually, having shot with it for 2 days, I just love my time with it. I just absolutely loved my time with it. And it just feels like such a complete camera. And all those small kind of upgrades all add together and just make it feel like this really useful tool. I love it. You can check out the full spec, because I'll be honest with you, there's loads to look at by heading over to parkcameras.com. I'll pop a link down in the description. You can also check out the new lens, which we've got a full review on the channel. Again, link down in the description so you can go check that out for yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well, because there's new content all the time. I'll see you in the next video. Until then though, as always, thanks for watching.